Hi, this is Dr. Gregory Sadler. I'm a professor of philosophy and the president and founder of an educational consulting company called Reason.io, where we put philosophy into practice. I've studied and taught philosophy for over 20 years, and I find that many people run into difficulties reading classic philosophical texts. Sometimes it's the way things are said or how the text is structured. But the concepts themselves are not always that complicated, and that's where I come in. To help students and lifelong learners, I've been producing longer lecture videos and posting them to YouTube. Many viewers say they find them useful. What you're currently watching is part of a new series of shorter videos, each of them focused on one core concept from an important philosophical text. I hope you find it useful as well. In Book 2 of his work on the nature of the gods, Cicero is going to have the Stoic character Balbus make a number of arguments for the existence of gods, and one set of them that we'll see discussed early on and elaborated there, and then recurring throughout the work, have to do with what we could roughly call cosmic arrangement, meaning that the cosmos, the universe itself, the earth and the heavens, have a very, rational and sensible structure, organization, arrangement to them that we human beings can discern, but for which we are not responsible. And if we want to put this into what's become a now traditional in philosophy of religion, classification of arguments about the existence of God, we would typically call this a design argument. We're looking at the cosmos and we're saying, there's a regularity, order. This couldn't have come from us. It can't just be random. There must be some kind of designer or being that brought this into existence the way that it is. And we're going to get this discussion that evokes several important early Stoic scholarks. So Cleanthes is the first person who is mentioned, and Cicero has Balbus say, our master Cleanthes gave 4 reasons to account for the formation in human minds of their ideas of the gods, and we're mostly interested here in what he calls the 4th one. So what is that? Well, there is a uniform motion and revolution of, it's translated as the heavens. That's fine that it's plural. It's strictly speaking, it's singular, kaili, but understanding the heavens as like a giant system that's there. So that includes the heavens themselves and, as he says, the varied groupings, and I think this is an important term, the ordered beauty, pulchritudinem ordinem, of the sun, moon, and stars. So the heavenly bodies that we actually observe. And we notice that this is there, right? And have been for many, many generations. Now the question is, well, how did this come about? So Cleanthes, according to Balbus, said the very sight of these was in itself enough to prove these things are not the mere effect of chance. They're not fortuita. They're not just happening to be the way that they are. And he's going to give an interesting, sort of analogy here. When a man goes into a house, a wrestling school, or a public assembly and observes in all that goes on, so here's the key things, arrangement, regularity, and system, rationem, modum, disciplinam, he cannot possibly suppose these things come about just randomly, that is, without a cause, sine causa, right? So there has to be some reason, some explanation for why they are the way they are. And it's not going to be enough just to say, well, they just happen to be that way. That's just kind of, as we say, hand-waving. It's not providing a real response here. And what kind of cause could this be? So he goes on and he says that there's somebody, okay, if we think about these public assembly, wrestling school, those sorts of things, there is somebody who actually is presiding and controlling. So if we're looking at the vast movements and phases of heavenly bodies and the ordered processes of a multitude of enormous masses of matter, which throughout countless ages of the infinite past have never in the smallest degree played false, what are we compelled to assert? That these mighty world motions are regulated by some sort of mind. Ab aliqua menta, some kind of mind. Not a human mind, it's got to be a divine mind, so there's at least one God in that case. Then he brings up Chrysippus. So Chrysippus was the successor to Cleanthes, very important early Stoic philosopher. So he says that although Chrysippus was very smart, his utterance here might well appear to have been learned by nature, not discovered by himself. So here's what Chrysippus has to say according to Cicero. If there is something in the world that the human mind and human reason, strength, and power are not capable of producing or bringing about efficere in this particular passage. So not just producing, but making be that way. Then, so here's the principle, whatever is producing this effect must necessarily be superior to, or literally just better than, melius, human being. So what could that be? He says, what better name is there for this than God, right? Whatever creates these things. We know that there is this vast cosmos that is ordered in this way, and human beings didn't bring it about. So something superior to human beings, that's what we call God. And I suppose that you could object at this point, well, what about like super powerful aliens or something like that? Well, by that logic, Chrysippus would say, well, that's what you call a god then, right? So that's going to be sort of a recapitulation, but also a new wrinkle on this argument provided by Chrysippus. And then he goes on to say, if gods don't exist, what can there be in the universe that is superior to human being? For human being alone possesses reason, which is the most excellent thing that can exist. But for any human being in existence to think that there's nothing in the whole world superior to himself, that would be an insane piece of arrogance. So there is indeed something superior to human beings, and that is God or the gods, the divine. Then we get some further arguments, and it's not quite clear whether this is supposed to be a continuation of what Chrysippus said or other things that other Stoics are providing or producing. So one, I think that'll be quite familiar to many people, not framed in terms of a house, but rather framed in terms of other products of human ingenuity, like, for example, a watch. If you happen to see a spacious and beautiful house, you wouldn't be induced to believe, even though you could not see its master, that it was built, and I really love this line, by mice and weasels. So it's muribus et mustellis, right? So it's not going to be just produced by other lesser things. If you were to imagine then, so here we go to the extension, this elaborate universe with all the beauty and variety of the heavenly bodies and the vast quantity and extent of sea and land, were your abode and not that of the gods, would you not be thought absolutely insane? So we are like the mice in this case. We didn't produce this thing. The gods did. It is the gods' domicile, so to speak, and we're just living inside of it and enjoying it, but we're not the ones who brought it about. So he says, that's another argument that we can give. And then he goes on and talks about intelligence. We're actually going to push that part off to a different argument. But he does come back to discussing these matters. And he says one other thing that I think is really not just interesting, but quite striking and beautiful as well. So he says, consider, and here's how it's translated, the sympathetic agreement, interconnection, and affinity of all things. Whom will this not compel to approve the truth of what I say? And what does he mean by this? He's going to give some examples. Would it be possible for the earth to be at one definite time to be beautiful with flowers and then be bare and stark, or the spontaneous transformation of so many things to signal the approach and retirement of the sun at the summer and winter solstices, or the tides to flow and ebb in the seas and straits with the rising and setting of the moon, or for the different courses of the stars to be maintained by the one revolution of the entire sky? And he goes on to say these processes and the harmony of all the parts of the world could not go on were they not maintained in unison by a single divine and all-pervading spirit. Now, that's a little bit of a different take. It's not just saying, well, the gods created all of this wonderful order that's so structured and isn't just like the heavenly things, but also their effects here on earth. It's saying that the gods are also maintaining that, or a god is maintaining that. So what's being translated here is sympathetic agreement and all those things. Tanta rerem consentiens conspirans continuata cognitio. You notice a lot of cons there. And he's going to finish this up by saying that this compels us, right, cogit, to approve the truth, comprobere, right? And so all these things are being brought together. The comprobere, you shouldn't be thinking of it as like proving the truth just by itself or admitting it. You're admitting the totality of all of these interesting connections that we can think of, cognitio, right? Which are consenting to each other, they are feeling each other out, and they are inhabited by a common spirit, we could say, and they are connected with each other. So, some very interesting reflections here that somewhat go beyond the argument itself, saying that, listen, we observe some sort of cosmic arrangement, can't have come from us human beings, although we're able to recognize it. Therefore, there must be some intelligent arranger, and that is what we call God or the gods. There's you could say, a sense here of just how much grandeur and structure and order there is for us to see, and the possibility of us grasping it, not just with a dry philosophical argument, but maybe with a sense of awe at the organization and beauty that we see in the cosmos.